Hello, everybody. This is some random Neko waking up from her really long nap to greet the world for the day. And by greet, I mean revisit an anime whose confusing story progression and stale character development was enough to make me seek out the manga it adapted just to see if the execution of the unique premise was really that bad all around, only to instead get another example of why the manga continues to be better than the anime, and anime-only watchers don't know what they're missing out on by refusing to read the manga. Anyways, the anime I'm talking about is Mayonaka no Occult Komuin, or Midnight Occult Civil Servants. The manga finished a few years back and was great, while the anime, which was released during the middle of serialization, took an interesting approach in adapting it. The Nocturnal Community Relations Division is a government department that specializes in solving cases involving the supernatural and occult unseen by ordinary humans. Young and unsuspecting Miyako Arata is newly assigned to the Shinjuku Ward office of the department, where on his first night, he finds himself discovering that every supernatural creature he once thought to be fiction actually exists and are known as anothers, and that he is the only human who can understand their non-human speech. Now mistaken by many occultic creatures as Abe no Seme, he quickly becomes notorious in his field for his special ability. However, he also soon finds that dealing with supernatural creatures is not as simple as he'd like to believe, as danger becomes a fundamental part of his work and his ability becomes a double-edged sword waiting to drop on his head. So Mayonaka no Occult Komuin seems to have an interesting premise, right? One you can have a lot of fun with and use to explore some interesting folklore, urban legends, and more through the lens of a civil servant working for an official government department, as long as you manage to stick the landing on execution, right? And for a few parts, it does. The anime introduces and explores mythologies and folklore from other cultures and countries besides Japan, and even beyond the ones that were introduced in the manga. There were quite a few I didn't know about, and I get curious enough to pause the episode to look up the lore in order to have a better understanding of how it might fit into the plot. I also find it really fascinating how, despite the supernatural nature of the world we're being introduced to, they manage to make it seem mundane, but not in a manner that's boring or dull. While sure, there are high stakes, threats of danger, and situations that escalate to life-threatening degrees, the anime managed to make it seem like it's just another day in the office, which fits considering these were civil servants working with the occult like the IRS works with taxes. I really like how the ordinary and extraordinary were blended almost seamlessly together, and how the different aspects of government and law enforcement were adjusted in order for the supernatural and occult to fit into the mundane world of humans. However, despite the harmony that's established, not all is well, since humans can't understand the language of another's, which is where Miyako comes in to explore the themes of communication and how just because you can communicate doesn't mean you truly understand. This is shown in how Miyako works to resolve issues caused by anothers, and the people around him either challenging his methodology or cautioning him against it until they come to see and are even inspired by how he's able to find a middle ground. As for the characters who occupy this world, they're ordinary humans, but with extra baggage or eccentricities expected from their line of work. Miyako Arata is the everyman who just wanted a job as a civil servant, only to be thrown into the deep end of the supernatural occult pool, and revealed to have a special ability that allows him to float better than his coworkers. And while he'd really like this not to be his life now, instead of quitting, he decides to go with the flow and just do the best he can. Sakaki Kyoichi is the shift leader and fellow ordinary man with no special ability, but carries baggage in the form of an incident from his past that still haunts him in the present. Himezuka Theo is the eccentric and scientific brains of the team, but not so much to the point of being a mad scientist or a quirky genius. He's just some guy with a passion for another research and the skills to back it up. And the person in charge of them all is Sendao Reiji, a savvy and considerate boss who looks out for his employees' well-being while strategically getting and cashing in favors to boost their advantage. In addition, we have Kanoichi Satoru, who serves as Miyako's foil and believes all anothers must be exterminated whenever possible and treated as natural disasters when not. Hui Hui Kyoto, or Kohaku, an Aztec trickster god who was once friends with Miyako's ancestor, and the rest of the employees of the Nocturnal Community Relations Division from other wards who are just trying their best to do their job without Miyako's language advantage. Now as for the production, it was just okay. The animation overall was kinda boring and even lazy at some points, with CGI being used for sequences that had multiple entities involved. It was honestly a bit of a shame that there were barely any exciting or interesting sequences for an anime that dealt with the supernatural and occult. Like sure, they have to be discreet since they're government employees tasked with making sure the occult stays hidden, but that doesn't mean there shouldn't be any sort of excitement for us to watch unfold. However, there are still plenty of times when the tone and graphics were appropriately unnerving to the point of disturbing to fit the occultic nature of the cases. In regards to the soundtrack, it was also just okay. The opening and ending songs were good, but the accompanying graphics were underwhelming to say the least. For the ending, it was fine since having limited or still graphics makes sense because it's the ending, and endings aren't known for having all sorts of moving parts. That's what the opening's for. However, the opening was just sad. The whole thing was kinda boring and all around uncreative, making it a waste of a good song. As for the rest of the soundtrack, it wasn't something I noticed except for a few tracks. A couple fit the tone of the anime or the context of the scene, while others just didn't. The latter happened more than the former, as the tracks that didn't fit sounded kinda quirky, but in an almost upbeat kind of way rather than in a manner that fit an anime involving the occult. Now, as you could probably already tell from what I've said so far, I have a lot of gripes with the anime adaptation of Mayonaka no Occult Komuin. To put it simply, it's not good, which is a shame since the manga is actually pretty solid. There are a lot of reasons for this, and they all stem from what seems to be the anime's desire to differentiate itself from the manga. I usually don't have a problem with productions taking creative license with the source material, as long as they respect it and interpret the material in an interesting way. But that's not the case here. The story has an escalation problem in that it escalates for the sake of escalation with none of the substance or build-up to justify it or make it make sense. One example of this is with the first case, where the team investigates a conflict between Tengu and angels. In the anime, the feuding angels and Tengu catch sight of an unexpected couple and assume a kidnapping is occurring. The pair then flees the park and takes the conflict all the way into the city. However, in the manga, the conflict never leaves the park as the pair was never spotted, and the tension can be more easily felt when Sakaki and Theo get ready to throw down with the Tengu and Angels, much to Miyako's alarmed confusion, because the conflict is confined to a small space as opposed to the wide open area in the anime. The only reason I can think of the anime escalating the conflict to such a scale was to unofficially introduce Kanoichi, but that begs the question of what the point of that was, since he doesn't even show up again until episode 9. And because of this unnecessary escalation, everything somehow feels underwhelming or subdued, which I didn't think could be possible. All of these issues can be traced back to the anime deciding to build upon and expand the world the manga presented, by sacrificing coherent story progression and good character development in the process. The interactions between characters are changed, with important conversations being cut out or shortened. The manga has a sense of urgency and tension that can be clearly felt, while the danger felt artificially produced at times in the anime. Various aspects of the occult community, from the people involved to the science behind it, are either missing or barely mentioned, and the characters became watered-down versions of themselves, with their emotions feeling dialed down or leaving me unsatisfied with how they react. A major example of this is what happened with Miyako and Kanoichi. In the anime, Miyako is idealistic at best and a doormat at worst, while in the manga, he's got a sense of agency and fights back when pushed. Kanoichi is an arrogant douche canoe and a borderline psychopath in the anime, while in the manga, he's just a stubborn jerk you come to sympathize for, because the manga uses words in the flashback of his past as opposed to only using visuals in the anime, and they also change the visuals without an explanation as to why. As for their clash, in the anime, Kanoichi is infuriating and smug, while Miyako just stands there and takes it. I almost threw my computer at the wall because of how frustrated their interactions made me. But in the manga, Miyako fights back immediately and can even understand where Kanoichi's coming from. He's just frustrated that Kanoichi doesn't want to understand where he's coming from. And when we finally get to the climax of Miyako and Kanoichi's conflict at the end of the Silkworm Princess arc, the clash in the anime just doesn't have the same punch as the clash in the manga. The anime also presents the cases out of order for no discernible reason. The first 2 episodes follow the manga story beats just fine, albeit with changed details. But then after that, they go out of order and off the rails, messing up the logical story progression in the manga for something that makes the progression feel abrupt or like a roller coaster. It even commits the cardinal sin of diverging from the manga and creating 3 episodes worth of original content even when it didn't have to, as the adaptation announcement was only a few days before Volume 8 was released, and the anime, including the OVAs, only covered everything up to Volume 7, with Volume 10 being released before the anime was aired. And then it ends on an odd note with an episode of original content, rather than something more fitting like the end of the Silkworm Princess arc. In my opinion, if they were going to go out of order, the final chapter of Volume 7 would have been a great one to end on, as it brought the conflict between Miyako and Kanoichi to a solid conclusion as they both reach an understanding with one another. TLDR, everything in the manga was just better. Story progression, character development, build up, payoff, emotions, sense of urgency, stakes, conclusions. It was all just handled better, and the anime really fumbled the ball in its poor attempt to adapt it. Also, side note, here is my one petty critique that I'm just gonna do in each video now. Why does the anime keep showing the date even though it doesn't have any bearing or relevance to the plot whatsoever? The manga never showed the date, and the OVAs didn't either. So why? Just why? Overall, Mayonaka no Occult Komuin gets a D+. It had an interesting premise and enough source material to properly adapt into a season, but squandered it in favor of doing its own thing, most likely in an attempt to separate from the manga and expand upon the world that was established. While I appreciate that they tried to do new things and introduced urban legends and occultic creatures that weren't in the manga, they ended up sacrificing a lot in the process, such as having a story with progression that made sense, a sense of urgency to match the stakes presented, a main character with a better personality and sense of agency than he was allowed to have, supporting characters whose emotions and actions weren't subdued or unnecessarily dialed up to 11, and so much more. This whole anime was just a mess, which was a real shame since they had all the elements for a good manga adaptation, but instead they tried too hard to do their own thing and got this as a result. Hopefully, if by some miracle this anime gets a season 2, the production team can redeem themselves by properly adapting the manga and producing original content as OVAs instead, because this was too interesting of a concept to waste on poor execution. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Reminder that this is just my opinion, so you can take it with as many grains of salt as you want. I don't mind either way, and would love to know your thoughts in the comments section down below. Please feel free to like, subscribe, and comment which anime you'd like me to give my 2 cents about next. This is some random Neko, going off to take a nap now. Don't forget to keep calm and just meow.